Hello. Welcome to the Empowered Artist Collective podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Apple, a multi-hyphenate actor, educator, acting coach, writer, dog mom, and founder of this vibrant community that champions artists as they carve out their own unique paths in this wild industry. Whether you're just starting out, in the thick of it, or seeking a bit of artistic fuel to expand your toolbox, you're in the right place. In this space, we'll have honest conversations, share actionable strategies, tips, and resources, and delve into the messy yet beautiful journey of living a sustainable, creative life. We unmask the reality of life as an artist, from navigating career highs and lows to nurturing your full human well-being. I chat with women and non-binary guests who share their personal stories, helpful learnings, and hearts to help you unlock your artistic potential, expand your knowledge, and show up fully and fearlessly in your artistry and daily life. Before we dive into this week's conversation, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. If today's chat resonates with you, please leave us a review. It helps us reach even more incredible artists just like you. And hey, feel free to spread the love. Share this podcast with a friend or post it on your socials, making sure to tag at Empowered Artist Collective and at @JenniferApple_ so we can chat with you there. All right, grab a cup of something cozy, settle in, and let's get to it. Ever wonder what it takes to become a sound designer? In this episode, I chat with Tony Award-winning sound designer Jessica Paz to demystify the path into sound design and offer a behind-the-scenes look at what the job entails. From breaking down the different jobs within the world of sound to discussing the gear that is helpful to know, Jessica shares the nitty-gritty of how she got started, what tools she uses on the job, and how to approach learning for this part of the industry. Together, we talk about advocating for yourself in a male-dominated space and how collaboration is at the heart of good design. She gives advice on how to build relationships with other creatives, tips for working in various houses, and why staying curious and asking questions is essential. Whether you're an aspiring sound designer or simply fascinated by how theater comes to life through audio, this episode offers actionable tools, insider knowledge, and empowering insights to help you step into and thrive in the dynamic world of sound design. Jessica Paz, welcome to the space.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so grateful that you are here. For anybody who does not know you, who are you today?
Oh, do I get to choose who I am today?
No. Oh, yeah. This is a choose adventure.
Choose your own adventure. I am Jessica Paz. I am a sound designer primarily for theatrical musicals and plays in the theatrical space. I've also done some concert work, audio drama work, podcast work. Not quite yet have worked on film or TV, but I hope to. Yeah. Sometimes I write music here and there. That's me. That's me today.
We have not had a sound designer in this space. And so to finally have somebody with the career that you have had in here feels like a true honor. So I'm very grateful. I'm curious to hear how you got into this work and certainly the journey that it's taken to get where you are.
I think similar to many people, there weren't a lot of like university or college programs for sound design, and I truly found it by accident. And I'll just do a brief little timeline so that we can talk about more fun things. But I was friends with someone who was an actress, and she was in like this Rocky Horror show at this community theater, and I'd go every weekend and hang out.
When you were in like high school or college, or
in my early 20s, yeah. Okay. And I didn't really know even that like backstage work was a job or being a stage. Like I just thought it was magic, and I wasn't making a lot of money at the time and didn't want to pay for tickets. So I started volunteering to like operate the fog machine or something.
Obsessed.
And then like eventually did sound and started stage managing and volunteered my time there. And then sound at that theater became, doing sound at another theater. And I was mixing, and a friend of mine was going to be directing a production of Smokey Joe's Cafe, and I wanted to be the sound designer. I didn't want to just mix it. So I went into the artistic director's office and asked him if I could sound design it, and told him if he wasn't happy with my work, after 2 days of tech, he could fire me.
Wow.
And then I never got fired.
Wow. I love the audacity, but also the confidence in knowing that you were going to be good at this thing that I guess you've never held a position officially doing.
No. But
How
I
did you
was
know
just
you
like,
were
what's the
ready?
worst he's going to say is no. And then I still get to
Yeah.
mix the show anyway. Okay.
How did you learn? And I guess, well, thank you for sharing that. But now, how did you learn to mix, to sound design? I mean, it seems like for all intents and purposes, you have not gone the quote unquote traditional, say, university training structure of it all. So were there mentors? Was it like, oh, I had, all these, I don't know, videos that I watched? Was it reading books? Was it just sitting and twiddling your,
It was a combination of that. And the reason that I started doing sound in the first place was because there was the show in that theater. And the sound was super bad, and it was feeding back all the time, and it was making me crazy. I was the stage manager. I wasn't even doing the sound. And I went to a sound friend of mine named Matt, and I asked him how to do a mic check. I had no idea what I was talking about.
Wow.
So he explained it to me, and then the next day I went in and I did a sound check with the cast before the show, and we had a show without feedback for the first time. And then I started mixing and then moved on to mixing musicals at other theaters and did that for a few years until I applied for a sound op position on an off-Broadway play with Rob Kaplowitz, a sound designer who became a mentor and a really dear friend of mine. And I worked my way from board op to the following show. He hired me as an assistant. And then he became the designer of a show called Fela, which was a musical about the life of Fela Kuti, Nigerian musician, Afrobeat artist, etc. And I got promoted to associate for that position. We did the show on Broadway. We took it to London's National Theatre. We took it to its home in Nigeria, and I got to mix a concert version of the show in Fela's nightclub, which was super amazing and strange. And so I worked for Rob for about 8 years. And then I kind of, theater slowed down a bit. I did a lot of work at venues like Sleep No More, Queen of the Night, The Box, and working with a lot of local bands throughout Brooklyn and various, doing a lot of event work mostly, but music mixing, which is wonderful, and was the assistant / associate for a sound designer named Mark Menard at the Delacorte Theater, and got promoted to designer at the Delacorte after he sadly passed away. But I designed out there as either associate or lead designer for 7 years. And then I ended up making a connection with Nevin Steinberg, who's a sound designer on Broadway. You may know him from a little skit called Hamilton, and Hadestown. And Dear Evan Hansen. So I became his associate for Dear Evan Hansen. And that sort of started our working relationship. Was an associate for him on shows like Bandstand, the Bright Star Tour, and Dear Evan Hansen throughout its life. And including its West End productions, etc. And then we became co-designers on Hadestown. But I actually started as his associate when the show was in Canada, and became co-designer when the show moved from Canada to the National Theatre in London, which was just prior to its Broadway engagement.
Thank you for going into the details of it, because I mean, I kind of wanted to like flex on your behalf, being like, let's just talk about the things that you've done, but you naturally got there. And it's just the breadth of work that you have done is expansive. And it really, I mean, if I think about like the pieces themselves, they all tell very different but heartfelt stories. And there's all like a pulse of real creativity. And so it's cool for me. I love an origin story is ultimately the bottom line, because it really tells for me like an ethos a little bit about the way in which somebody works and the things that they value and the way in which they build community, of which clearly you have. I'm curious to dial back just a bit. And this is like the nuts and bolts of it all, which may feel, maybe reductive for some folks, but I think it's important before I maybe throw other things into the mix of like, what is the landscape of sound design for positions? As in like, what is actually possible, right? Like you're naming associates, you're naming, co-creating, you're naming mixing, you're naming sound ops, like you're naming these positions that, as I've been in the career for a while and been in many shows, like I've interacted with folks like this, but maybe for folks who are newer or are like, hey, I really do love sound, but I'm not even quite sure what is possible.
Sure.
What are some of the jobs that even exist or the things that people could do?
I'll talk about the positions just at the Broadway level. Right. Obviously, every level has sort of a different way that they do things, but Broadway is the most bespoke, right? We go into a Broadway theater, we get 4 walls, some seats, and maybe some heat.
We hope.
They'll turn the heat on at some point. So we bring in everything, every cable, every microphone, every connector, adapter, like you name it. There is really, truly nothing, including dressing room, speaker systems and all of that. So there's the sound designer, right? So that's the sort of the head of the department responsible for the sound system design, the content creation, etc., for hiring the team that works on the show. And then alongside the sound designer would be the associate or assistant. Sometimes there's both. There could potentially be an internship position as well at the design table. And then you have your A1 or mixer. They, generally speaking, share the responsibility of programming the sound console alongside the associate and designer throughout the production. And they are responsible for mixing the show on a day-to-day basis and maintaining the sound of the show on a day-to-day basis, up to and including, how new actors and understudies sound and etc. There is the A2 who works backstage with the actors and all of their microphones, and is in charge of building all of those rigs that the actors wear are all custom built for every person, for every show. And then they also kind of take care of the band area. So all of the microphones and monitoring for the musicians gets maintained by that person as well. On the installation side, so at load in and at the shop prep. So there'll be a shop order that I put together as a designer. That is all the equipment we want to use for the sound system. There's about a 3 to 4 week shop prep period where all the equipment comes into like a zone in the warehouse, and a team of people build the sound system from scratch and custom, and then it gets tested, it gets put in boxes, brought to the theater, and gets put back up and then tested again.
It's wild.
And so there's a production audio position who is the lead in charge of the installation of that sound system in the space and leading the team. And so then there's a team of people that work with that person of 4 to 6 to 8 people who are there throughout the load-in process and tech process to install the system and get it functioning, which is great. Those people will peel off after opening. Production audio sort of stays around in the background, depending on the show, to help maintain it, staff it, plan things, work with the team that's on the ground day to day in the maintenance of the show. And sometimes there's an A3. In London, there's usually always an A2 and an A3. The A3 just being another additional backstage person who is coverage for the department. Like, it works a little different on the West End than it does in the US. Or there could be an A3, for instance, on a show like A Beautiful Noise, where Neil Diamond, as a character, has like 6 guitars in the show. Yeah. There's an A3 position that is just guitar tech. That's all they do is guitars.
Wow.
That's a basic rundown of
what's a very helpful rundown. And it also just illuminates, I think, like the magic of theater in some ways. How we had Amanda Zeev come here to talk about lighting design, and that too is like, if you're an audience participant, you don't necessarily think about like how that light was set in order to make this actor seen in the way that you are seeing them so that it tells the story. And it's the same thing for me with sound, is like, we don't necessarily think like, oh, right, this particular speaker is put over here very specifically for X, Y, and Z reasons. And we are hearing this kind of, feedback very specifically because this is what we need to, like, we're not thinking about that in the best way because that's part of just like the way that things are functioning. But it doesn't just happen out of nowhere.
I'll give you an example. It's a really, really simplistic example, but I just did a show in San Francisco and there were a number of sound effects in the show that were these various buzzers, like game show buzzer, a buzzer for some other thing, various buzzers.
Yeah.
And then there's also this apartment scene in which there's like a ding dong, like classic, very classic doorbell. But dramaturgically, I wanted that doorbell to fit in with the theme, the rest of the buzzers and bells in the show.
Yeah.
So I added distortion to it.
Wild. Yeah. Yep.
It's a doorbell. It literally makes sound for not even an entire second.
No, but it's real because
that's the kind of detail that we're thinking about. There's hours and hours and hours that goes into these designs, lighting, sound, automation, all of it. And every moment is very carefully crafted.
Yeah.
And should be, right?
Yeah.
That's the point. So, but that's an example of how every moment, that's something even as simple as a little doorbell is.
Yeah. Well, that's where the design part comes into play, I imagine. So I'd love to break that down for listeners around your process when you are like given a project and somebody's like, hey, I'd love for you to design this. Do you have like I always do this kind of thing in this kind of order for every show? And if so, what is that? Or is it dependent upon the project and the creative team that you're working with? I'd love to hear a little bit about your process.
Yes.
Great. The end. Thank you.
All of it. It depends on the show. It depends on the team, like the creators, the producers, the director, my relationship with the director, how we communicate, etc. So yes, there is an order, right? There's a list. And it's written down somewhere. I do have it written down. I don't need to reference it all that much, but it's a list that I've built over time. And yes, there's sort of an order in which I do things, but it also is a list in which you can do any of the things almost out of order. And I like to think of sound design as sort of circular.
Okay.
In that basically it's sound design is a sculpture and your job as a designer is to remove everything that isn't the sound of the show. Right? So I mean, you just take away everything that isn't the sculpture. So it's kind of like you just like turn it all on and then you take away what doesn't belong and it gets more and more and more refined. And then all of a sudden it just like lives in this pocket. And it's also about a relationship between the designer and the A1. And I hope I'm answering your question. So it's, so in the room, it's about the conversations between myself and the mixer, my goal, and then they have to execute it. So I have to trust that they can hear the show in the way that I hear it, and everyone hears differently.
Yeah.
I mean, we all hear the same and that like the way hearing functions, but our interpretation of what we hear, our emotional response to what we hear is different, and what each individual likes in terms of auditory information is different, right? So it's a circuit. It's both linear and circular sound design. So, and I would say that that's true for both the pre-production process, because sometimes, like, I'll have a show in the shop prepping, and I don't necessarily have a signed contract yet.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
It's just because there's still like paperwork happening, or so you kind of. Yeah, it does have to happen in a certain order, but it also can happen out of order.
So then with that, how do you know where you are in the order? I guess is it just you just trust that you know that certain things are going to have to happen and you might have to bounce a little bit depending?
Yes. So that comes with time and experience. Audio itself has to function like the programming of a show in general has to go linearly, right? The way I think about the sound of a musical theater show is that we are mixing and mastering an album live every night in front of an audience, right? It's live. And yes, there's programming in there so that we can call up and do things and, on a cue by cue basis. But there is a person, the mixer sitting behind that sound console, mixing every line by line. So if you and I are on stage as two actors and we're talking to each other, your microphone is only on when you're speaking and mine is only on when I'm speaking.
Yeah. And
so there's a person that does that. There's a really great video, actually. I think it's Adam Savage does an interview with an A1 who worked on the Hamilton tour. Mm-hmm. And there's a video of how that show is mixed, how theater musicals are mixed. So it's, so we start with like, okay, we like to make the joke that like on day one of tech, we put people on stage in microphones and like sound comes out and no one gets hurt. It's just like, that's like, okay. So, there's like the tuning day. Like I go through and I design this whole sound system on paper. Right. Mm-hmm. And then you get into the room and you turn the system on and you tune it and you calibrate it, etc. And then you turn on a microphone and you're like, well, and then you hear it and you're like, oh, good, it works. Okay. Good.
Yeah. What you think in your brain or what's on a paper is actually real, and then it actually is something that you did want. And
you know that it will because you've done it before. Yeah. And you've done it over and over again, but there's always something new about every situation. It's a different room. It's a different speaker. It's a different microphone. It's a different whatever. So you're just
performer.
You make all these plans, right? Just like any design department, it makes all these plans, and then you get into the space or you get on the canvas and you're like, oh, that doesn't work.
Yeah. And you adjust accordingly.
Right. Because it's linear and we're doing this live mixing and mastering in the moment. As we go through the show during like dress runs and previews, the show will start out sounding one way at the beginning of it. And then by the time I get to the end of the dress run, I've now been running around the theater with my iPad making adjustments, and the show then sounds a different way by the end of that dress run or that preview or whatever. So I might get notes from the director about, oh, so-and-so wasn't loud enough in the opening number, but I probably already fixed that by the end. So you got to know like what notes you already dealt with as it's happening. And so then, it's like, multiple passes at the show, and you just refine it each time that you go through. And eventually, by the time you get to opening, you settle on this is the show. And then that just gets replicated every day.
Hi, actor friends. Talking to you. If finding the perfect monologue has you feeling stuck, I've got just the thing. I've put together a free monologue selection toolkit just for you. It's packed with resources, free and paid options, plus tips for choosing, editing, and customizing pieces to showcase you. Head over to jenniferapple.net/freebie and stop avoiding the auditions that ask for a monologue or waiting for the perfect piece to simply fall into your lap. Dive into this free toolkit that I set up just for you that'll set you up to feel agency over your process and artistry. That's jenniferapple.net/freebie and get started on finding your next go-to monologue. When do you first join a process? Is it once, the show is announced and they're like, we need a creative team, and then, slowly you hear information about it? Is it more like, okay, we are in full like dress rehearsals, or like, we're in the studio space before we're actually in the theater and we need you to see a run through, and now you start to build? Like, where are you starting your creative journey with it usually?
Definitely well before we get in the theater. Yeah. Not to say that it doesn't happen that way sometimes, but certainly not at the Broadway level. Mm-hmm. I'm generally brought on sort of after scenic, but I will say that there is almost no such thing as too soon. For me, I like to think and feel very strongly that the sound design of Hadestown is a byproduct of having been involved in the process from so early on and able to really develop the sound design of the show to support the storytelling and do that alongside the rest of the creative team.
Do you have, at this point now in your career, fellow creatives that you will always, and also just like behind the scenes mixers that you will try to bring along with you on the journey each time? Or are you someone that's like, you know what, like this creative team is going to build what they build, I'm going to be here, and we're going to trust that these people are also going to be like-minded? Or how does that work for you?
There are certain, for instance, directors who, if they call me and ask me if I'm available, I won't even ask them what the show is. It's just like, oh, great. Like, we're going to do this thing together.
Duh.
I trust that they've picked a great project and I love working with them. And then there are, okay, I want to read the script. I want to know what this is. What is the scope? And get very specific. And then I've also, as I've sort of moved forward and ahead in my career, as much as a creative team or a show maybe looking to bring me on as a sound designer, I'm also looking at whether or not the project is right for me, whether or not I can serve the project in terms of storytelling. Like if someone came to me and said, we need you to compose this thing, I don't compose. So I'm not going to say yes to that show. Right. Yeah. But it's as early as possible is my preference.
Yeah. And do you have certain associates or assistants that you've been working with now also in the same kind of vein that you were for others that you are bringing along for the ride?
I try to. Yeah. I love that. And you establish a shorthand, and the first time you work with a new associate, they don't necessarily know how you work, so they don't know what the expectations are. So there's kind of a process by which I usher a new associate through that first process. And then the next time we do the show, well, they know how to format that thing, or they know how the title block should look. And then we don't need to repeat that process again. But I also try to keep meeting new people and learning from new folks.
How do you meet new people or new folks in this world? Or do they kind of knock on your door now?
Both. It's it's both ways. I will get emails from people looking for work or wanting to send me their resumes, wanting to have coffee. Sometimes I get emails from students wanting to talk to me because they're writing a paper for school. I have a contact database where I keep people's resumes, and I keep notes on what someone's favorite ice cream. I don't know, things that I could get them for opening night gifts. I'm now incorporating a frequency of contact. So there are certain people that I do, I remember it of my own accord in my mind, but I want to keep up with people on a regular basis. So I'm setting it up so that my contacts automatically sends me an email.
I love it.
On those intervals to reach out to certain people.
Yeah, I think we take it for granted. I know myself as well. I've been, over this past couple of years, really trying to be more intentional about the relationships that you build and the people that you meet, and in an organic way of you've shared things with me. We've spent time. We've talked. I am curious about your life, even if we haven't spoken in a hot second. What are the ways in which we can continue staying engaged? And you never know who people become and who you become a little bit.
And to be honest, because I value my relationships, I even have reminders in my calendar that remind me at certain intervals to call my brother or call my best friend.
Yeah.
Because if not, otherwise what happens is not that I forget to call my brother. It's just that 6 weeks will go by and I'll be super busy.
For sure.
So I want to be able to remember to send him hey, I love you.
Yeah. Yeah, I literally, with my friends now, when we go out for whatever we do, we will pull out our calendars then, knowing that things can change and we can always change it, but put a calendar date. And it could be 2 months out that are just hey, we are now going to be intentionally seeing one another, because time, I don't know where time goes. And certainly when you're in true adulthood, it's just where is it and what is it? No.
If it doesn't get on the calendar, it will never happen. But if it gets on the calendar, even if it moves, it will occur. Right?
1,000%. Yep. That is the mantra to live by. I will live and die by it, truly. I love it. Are there certain actual processes that you use? Is that systems on, your computer, or, I believe that every sound designer needs to play around in this kind of thing, or really behoove them to own an iPad. I don't know, but are there certain things that you're actually, this would be a really good, helpful sound designer starter kit to get familiar with?
Sure. I think Ableton Live is probably the best piece of software to use for creating sound effects. Just in terms of its flexibility and speed to being able to spit things out and alter and stretch and cut up. And it's just fast for that kind of work and really creative. And it doesn't always it doesn't function linearly all the time. You can use it non-linearly, which is really great.
Is that considered industry standard, or is that just your preference? Or is there not even an industry standard? I don't know.
That's my preference for what DAW to use. I prefer Pro Tools for mixing, Ableton Live for creating sound effects and content, and And then there's Logic, which sort of lives in the world in between. And so depending on what the project is, and I may use any one of those DAWs. I use MainStage as a reverb engine host. We also keyboards and the music department use MainStage for keyboard programming and synth sounds and things like that as well. So I don't do that part of the job. That's the music department, but we use MainStage in the sound department on my shows to host reverbs. So I'd say that's a pretty big tool. And I will say that in terms of technology and software, I tend to incorporate new tools on a regular basis. I set aside what I call a friend of mine was like, "What are you talking about?" And so it's like R&D. And they were like, "What?" And I'm like, "I know, I'm just like self-employed, but I do set aside time for R&D, for research and development."
Yeah.
And, we'll try a new piece of software or take a little course, read. It's, research time. It's new tools and new practices. And I'm actually in the process of reorganizing my workflows for my to-do lists and calendars and email to all new software, which I did about a year ago, and I'm doing again because the software technology is changing so rapidly now with AI that there's just a new solution all the time. And I've never quite found one product that can do all the things that I need it to do. So sometimes I will build custom solutions for things I need to manage.
Yeah. I think you're naming something that's also really wonderful is how adaptable it seems that you are in the way in which you work. I think there's no fault in any of it. There's some folks that, they do what they do and they do it really well and it is what they do and they stick to it. And then there are other folks, which it seems like maybe is yourself, which is, you know what you do it really well. And if there's something else that will make you do your job better, or there's a way to improve this particular area of the thing, the curiosity around learning what that could be to continue growing yourself and expanding the ways in which you work, you're open to that. And arguably that's, again, like what's going to continue propelling your career for the rest of your life as you continue, moving with the times is, I feel like my grandmother, but like moving with the times, adapting with the way in which the world is moving. And certainly sound is very much like a tech-based part of what we do.
And the technology is changing. What I tend to enjoy about having a way in which I do things is that I like to think that I show up to each show with a set of tools.
Yeah. And
those tools are the processors I like to work with, the software I'm familiar with, the console that I enjoy, that I know how to program really well. It's a set of tools, and then I expand on that tool set specifically either for the show because it's for the show specific, or I'm just trying something new and experimenting. Yeah. But having the tools means that I can set myself up to do it the way that I've always done it, but have the flexibility to do it a different way if needed.
Correct. Which is what makes you brilliant at what you do. So yay to knowing yourself and like the way you work and giving yourself growth opportunities. I feel like that's how we don't stay stagnant and how we continue staying creative.
And dramaturgically and artistically, what solved something on another show won't necessarily work on this show.
Right. Yes.
For any number of reasons.
Yeah. What are some of the things that now, at this point in your career, are really fulfilling for you creatively? That could be project-based, that could be community-based, that could be like, again, like the technology-based. Like where are you finding current fulfillment and creative inspiration?
I will answer that, I think, in terms of the people I choose to surround myself with creatively and the projects that I choose to take on. I mean, there's ways I feel creative with the technology, but it's about the relationships. It's about the storytelling. It's about feeling part of something and that I'm working with other people and we're all working together to create something new. Yeah. It's like giving birth. I like to say that after a show, when I'm done with a show, that I have postpartum for like a week or two after I'm finished because you work so hard and so many hours and, almost to the detriment of every other area of your life for the production period. And then the show opens and it's just over.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's very real. It's that creative
like
cycle.
Getting pushed off a cliff.
Yeah. It's very, very real. We had a conversation with Liz Kimball in our first season all about that creative cycle of like the idea, the actual creativity, the investment, the physical investment, the emotional, the spiritual, whatever, the birthing of the thing. And then, yeah. And we talked about that. It's over. And it really is something that arguably many artists don't even really name because it's just part of what we do. We create the thing and we move on to the next thing. And then we create that thing and move on to the next thing. And it can easily just become part of that cycle. We just create and then move on. But to not acknowledge that process, in my opinion, is just diminishing the art itself. Like that, and that was the creation. Like that was the thing that took so much out of you. And so under the hangover that comes afterwards, the postpartum, the depression, the sadness, the exhaustion, all of those feelings, A, is like totally natural, but B, it would be wild if you didn't feel that. Otherwise, where were you in that process?
And also you just are now going from seeing, 50 or 60 people every single day for months on end that you've now gotten used to and attached to not seeing those people every single day anymore. It's a lot of relationships to shift all at once and also finish a project. And so I will used to beat up on myself for spending a day or two in bed after a project was done. But now I just... No.
Yeah. I think I really love that you're naming that because we don't do what we do in isolation at all. It is a massive collaboration. And as you named, when I asked all the different like people who even work within the sound department, it's like you named 50 people and that is just one department, let alone the entire infrastructure of the thing that everyone's creating. And to be in a reminder that what we do is a collaboration, I think is really important.
It's like going through a breakup.
I know. And one that you're like, but I didn't want this to end now. Like I wasn't ready.
What happened?
Yeah.
Oh, there was a time. I see. Got it. Yeah.
Right. This was time constrained and I wasn't aware actually, or I didn't listen, or I forgot that small detail.
Yeah.
In the same vein, are there certain topics that you are interested in pursuing for projects? Or again, is it really just more about like the people that you're doing it with and whatever, and trust that those relationships will create something beautiful?
Both.
Okay.
Right. But I'm also expanding a little bit into producing.
Okay.
And as a Tony nominee, so there's a number of things as a sound designer. I may have influence in a room on a collaborative process and on how that show gets made, but I am finding myself desiring to be having a bit more influence over what is being made.
Yes.
Right. And what is being rewarded for being made. And so I'm also doing a little bit of producing. And so it's what comes my way and what speaks to me, and in terms of topic, and of course, women's stories, queer stories, environmental stories. But then there's also so there's the really deep stories, and then there's shows like Six, right? That are these really fun concert experiences and are over the top and like bombastic, but amazing and exactly what they're supposed to be. And that's really fun too, right? Yeah. There's both. There's all of that. And then there's the content of this show doesn't necessarily speak to me, but I have this really great relationship with you as a director. So
yeah. Did you notice a shift post Tony, which mazel, congratulations. How was that experience, and have you noticed a shift?
There's a funny shift in that everyone assumes that you're like super, super double, triple booked. And so then doesn't necessarily, they're like, so I didn't call you for that thing because like.
I just assumed that now that you're Tony'd. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that was definitely a thing. Yeah. And a shift in terms of how many people reach out to me, a shift in terms of what's being offered to me. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
But there's an interesting thing in theater is that, I was part of the Tony winning sound design team of Fela. And the day, like 2 days after opening, I was mixing a musical at a high school.
It's wild.
It's wild. But funny enough, that musical at that high school paid me more per hour than I made on Broadway when you really compared the time commitment to rate.
Wow.
Yeah. Crazy.
Cool. That's cool. That's really a moment to reflect.
So, I mean, it's like, it's humbling. It's like, oh, okay, right. There's this work and there's this work and they're both very different, but they're both very I need to do just as good a job on the Broadway show as I do on the high school show. I need to show up in the same way.
Yeah. I think it goes back to what we were saying about like the breakup of it all, but like yes, you have this award and this accolade and this credit, and people now hopefully are more aware of your brilliance and the work that you do. And because we are freelance and the show ends, we are always in that hustle again to find the next thing. And I think it's naming that in the ecosystem that we live in, I think as performers, we feel that a lot more because you're consistently in the audition process where the rigor of the daily maybe feels a little bit more intense. But it's the same thing for a casting director. It's the same thing for a director. It's the same thing for a sound designer. It's the same thing for anybody who is in this ecosystem where the show ends. And that reminder that we are actually all in this together and we are all freelancing and hustling, for me is comforting, where it's just like, this isn't an isolating thing. You're not the only one who's experiencing it. And we can go to our community and be in communion around that feeling that we all know very well.
And there's also the saying, you're only as good as your last gig, right? So I want to show up the same person on a high school musical gig as I do on a Broadway gig, right? It's just, there's no difference in who I am and what I bring to the table as an artist. It doesn't matter. And I was working with, it was funny. I was laughing with Alex Lacamoire, who was the orchestrator of, and the MD of Hamilton, was also the orchestrator of Dear Evan Hansen, where I got to work with him. And he had just like won, he's got Grammys and Tonys and all of this. And then here he is like orchestrating something for Dear Evan Hansen, sitting in like the back corner of the theater, and he doesn't even have a table. He's like balancing his keyboard on his lap. Like, you just won a Grammy or whatever. Like, did maybe,
and they can't even get you a table.
Like, maybe someone could get you a table.
Yeah,
that's like what I mean. It's just really funny.
Yeah, I love that. Have you been using the same monologue for years? Are you gearing up to apply for BA, BFA, or MFA programs and need pieces for that process? Or maybe you just have no idea where to even start with monologue hunting? I get it, and that's why I offer monologue sourcing. This is a unique process where I find monologues chosen specifically for you. So many artists pick pieces based on external labels like type or for roles rather than finding material that represents who they truly are. So here's how it works. We'll meet virtually and you'll share all about who you are, your passions, values, beliefs, and everything in between. Don't worry, I will help guide you through this process. Then I'll get to work finding monologues that fit you like a glove. With years of experience sourcing pieces for hundreds of artists, I've seen the difference it makes to have a monologue that genuinely feels like you. So, if you want to feel empowered about the monologues you bring into rooms and use for auditions, I would love to help you find them. And because you're a listener of the Empowered Artist Collective podcast, I'm offering an exclusive rate. Head to empoweredartistcollective.com/podcast promo to register and claim the special offer. That's empoweredartistcollective.com/podcast promo. I cannot wait to help you find monologues you absolutely adore. For anybody who is wanting to get into sound design or is wanting to get into the world of sound generally, and there's like a barometer of age in this, it's like, the going to school for it, the taking classes for it, the reading of things, like what would be your advice for anybody who is listening to this and interested, whether they've been in it a little bit or whether they are first starting out?
I would say read the trade magazines, stay abreast of new technology, and also dive into various studio production techniques. And while not all of them are able to be replicated in a live environment, but teach you various ways of processing audio that and also the various, parallel fields in audio inform each other, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Something that is done on film could maybe be done in a live environment, right? And that, I think those worlds are bridging more and more as technology grows and becomes more capable, right? So I think that that's important. And a lot of the techniques that I use on Hadestown, I learned from just reading magazines.
Do you believe that one has to go to school for sound and sound design?
No. I think that there is something that you get from school and college particularly. One is that you don't necessarily learn everything you need to know about your major, but you learn how to think and you learn how to ask questions.
Yeah.
And I think that some of the most successful people in the world are people who know how to think and how to ask really good questions and know that they don't have to have the answers to everything because it's impossible, right? So that's what you get out of school. But I think the bulk of the education of how to do sound and how to do sound in these rooms comes from experience.
Yeah, and on the job.
And then there's a talent, right? And you can do all the things and have no talent. You can do all the things and have talent. Like so there's all aspects. But I think college is a great path. And also, not only does it teach you how to think and ask good questions, which is part of thinking, it also helps you form relationships. There's a lot of people who they all went to Yale together, and so they do shows together all the time. And there are these groups that form. And you get to build relationships, which is important. I didn't have that. And I think that without those relationships, things take longer. It takes longer to get where you want to go.
Yeah.
I will say one thing, and it's about being a woman in the industry. It'll be the only thing that I say, is that not only is it really important to be treated as an equal, being a woman or even a person of color in the industry, to be treated as equal, it is important to enter these rooms and feel equal. Right? We need to feel like we need to come in not questioning that and not showing up and putting the imposter syndrome aside, I think.
Yeah.
And coming into these rooms as an equal. Even if we go home and,
cry.
Whatever. But I think that it's just as important for women to be given the place in the room and for women to take it.
Yeah.
And to not wait for it to be given to them either. Show up feeling equal. Because I think showing up feeling equal gives people permission to treat you equal and vice versa, right? And being treated as equal gives us permission to act as equal. And I think it all informs each other. And I don't think that we should be waiting to be given permission to participate in rooms in the ways that we want. I think that in the room, then we got to show up fully, right?
I love it. Yeah.
Not halfway, and not just fully, actually, probably like 125%, 110%. We got to show up better. Right? There's no, I've been criticized for having high standards.
High standards for yourself or for others or for the show?
All. Probably highest for myself, but my standards are very high. And, to live up to my expectations can be hard because my standards are really high.
And the and to this, not the but, the and to that is that that you're capable of it. You wouldn't be setting those expectations or those standards for yourself if you didn't know that you could.
And I will add to that in terms of, what should people learn, all of those things. I happen to feel like my career has been very special because I've been able to do all the jobs. I've been an A2, I've been an A1, I've been a stagehand, I've pushed boxes, I've run cable across fields, I've, slept in console covers, I've, packed trucks, and I've worked in shops, and I've done so many of the jobs, and therefore I feel like that gives me permission to have high standards, and I get to have high standards because I know how to do the job.
Yeah.
And can do it.
Yeah. And you put in actual hours and sweat and blood and tears probably to make it.
I know what it takes to do it. I know how hard it is. And I know it can be done. So let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I also just want to name that, like, even if you didn't do all of the other jobs, you're still worthy of it. Like, I just, like, you have put in all of that and therefore even more so. But even if you didn't, like, you are putting in the time, the energy, the talent, the emotional presence for all of these jobs that you are currently doing.
100%.
And that also makes you worthy for it. Period.
But I think that it makes me a better designer to be able
1,000%.
to know and understand what it feels like to mix a show. And that gives me the ability to conversate with my A1 in a better and different way.
Yeah, you're a collaborator because you actually know what these jobs entail. Mm-hmm. You're not just talking to people who do things. You're like, no, I get this actively.
Yeah, actively get it. Yes.
Yeah, I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for going on this journey with me and for sharing all of your beautiful insights and the various aspects of this part of the industry. I know I've learned, and I know our listeners will learn. So for anybody who wants to continue following along for your journey, potentially reach out to you for questions, thoughts, considerations, how within your boundaries is the best way for people to find you or follow along for your journey?
I have a website, jessicapaz.com, that is probably in desperate need of updating because I do my own web design and bookkeeping and taxes and accounting and all of that. So there's just not time to do it all myself.
I got it.
And then I have Facebook and Instagram. You can find me on those, which are also linked on my website. And my contact information should be on there. But if it isn't, it should be design@jessicapaz.com is a good address to reach me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. That's it for today's episode. I hope you walk away with some fresh insights, feel inspired, and a little more empowered to take the next step on your artistic journey. Remember, whether it's a small shift or a big breakthrough, every step forward counts. You've got this, and we're here cheering you on every step of the way. If you found today's episode helpful, don't forget to hit subscribe so you'll never miss out on the discussions we have each week. And if something today really resonated with you, please leave us a review. It truly is one of the best ways to help other artists find our podcast and join in on the conversations. Plus, we feel the love too when you do. And don't keep all this goodness to yourself. Share this episode with your people or post about it on social media. Be sure to tag @Empowered Artist Collective and @JenniferApple_ so we can see what's landing for you and keep the conversation going. As always, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being a part of this incredible community. Keep creating, keep thriving, stay empowered. I'm Jennifer Apple. Until next time.